When I was 23, my boyfriend and I broke up, so I was in the process of moving away from my hometown to Houston. I just wanted to start over somewhere new. It was about 3 a.m., and I was driving through a small town in Texas on my way to Houston when I decided to stop for gas. It was pretty empty, but the gas station was open. As I was filling up, looking at my phone, I saw a truck pull up to the pump on the other side of me. I wasn't paying any attention until I put my phone in my pocket to put the nozzle back, and I saw a man just staring at me. I smiled at him, turning to put the gas cap back on, when I saw 4 more men, 2 on either side. I thought that was weird, but I just wanted to get in my car and go. As I went to pull the handle on my door, they attacked me. I was screaming and kicking and fighting as hard as I could, but I wasn't strong enough. 2 of them pulled me into the back seat of the truck while 2 of them pushed me in. I ended up draped over their laps. I was still trying to get free, but it was hard to move with their weight holding me down. I started to cry. I have never felt so weak in my life. I started scratching one man thinking if they kill me, his DNA will be under my nails. They pulled up to a motel and carried me inside of a room. I was screaming again, and the oldest looking one started hitting me, telling me to be quiet. One of them said if I was good, they wouldn't hurt me. They held me down on one of the beds and tied my hands and feet together with a belt and some kind of thin string like a shoelace. I was panicking and still crying, just telling them to let me go. I wouldn't say anything. I wouldn't tell anyone, that's what I told them. They started talking to each other in another language, one I couldn't recognize. Looking around the room, I saw bags and beer cans, lots of beer cans. It smelled like they had all been staying in this one room with 2 beds for a while. I don't really want to get into what they did to me, but at some point, one of the men said they needed more beer. They decided the smallest one was going to stay in the room with me. So after the other 4 left, it was just me and the man who looked to be around my age. I remember thinking, I could probably beat him up if I get loose. I asked him if I could use the bathroom, and when he untied me, I bolted for the door. I swung the door open, and he grabbed my arm. I yelled, "Get off me," and he let go, eyes wide. I ran down the street, no clothes on, and jumped in front of the first car I saw. It was a confused elderly man. He rolled down his window and yelled, "What are you doing?" Like I was ruining his morning or something. I told him I needed help and that I was kidnapped. He drove me to the police station where I was given scrubs and could file a report. They ended up saying I needed to go to the hospital for an examination so they could record any evidence that the man may have left on me. I just wanted to shower and go home, honestly. I just wanted to talk to my mom. They found the men the same day. It turns out they were all brothers. They didn't say what they planned on doing with me after, or why they did it in the first place. They claimed to be all blackout drunk at the time. I ended up moving to the other side of the country, and even though I know they're still in prison, I get nightmares about what happened. I don't use my phone at all in public anymore, and my current boyfriend says I'm too paranoid, but I have to be, right? I never want to feel that weak again in my life.
I met someone who looked just like me while traveling one day. He looked so much like me that I believed he was a twin. We both stopped and looked at each other in the face for a few seconds, and he asked me, "Who are you?" I couldn't say anything in shock and only looked at his face. He also looked at me in the face and continued to look incredulous. I ran away with an indescribable discomfort, but that night, I had a dream that my body burned down and turned into ashes. And when I woke up in the morning, my whole body began to crack and discharge. As time went by, my body began to hurt more and more. Gradually, it became difficult to breathe, and it became difficult to move as the arms and legs hardened. I was lost in thought. I heard I'd die if I met a doppelganger. Am I dying? I ended up visiting a famous fortune teller who was surprised to see me and said, "You were born by God's mistake. God is trying to turn you back into nothingness." I said I wanted to live, and the fortune teller shook his head and said there was no way. I went back stunned, and after that day, my body began to dry out like a dying tree. As the day went by, I became senile. My back was bent, my skin cracked, and blood began to leak out. Even after visiting a doctor, he said there was no cure, saying it was a strange disease with an unknown cause. I shouted at the sky, "God, you created me and now you're trying to get rid of me?" I wanted to live somehow, so I exercised for 6 hours a day and took care of all kinds of vitamins and health foods. Fortunately, I started to feel better, and I was able to slow down the speed of my body's breakdown. Then one day, I had a dream again. I saw a person who looked like me lying down in the form of a lump of ash, because his whole body was burned. I woke up screaming, and now I'm in a better shape than ever before. Surprisingly, after that, I gradually recovered my health and gradually returned to a healthy body. I don't know what happened. Did God change his mind? Or was it all just a coincidence? But one question remains in my mind. Where is the person who looked like me now? Is he alive?
When I was 8 years old, I used to live in my grandma's house in Ecuador. Many of the neighbors would talk to my parents about seeing weird stuff in the house, like shadows moving around the windows when we weren't home. The first thing that would come to our heads was that someone must have broken into the house, but nothing would ever be missing. Of course, they didn't think that there was someone breaking in. They were sure that our house was haunted. Everyone even refused to come inside for parties or any other special occasion. They told us to get a priest and to get rid of any bad spirits. We didn't take their warnings as something important because my parents don't believe in those kinds of things. Although I would hear someone going up the stairs at night, our stairs were really old, so they would make a loud sound when someone would step on them. However, when I checked, there was nothing. I would just run to my bed and cover my head with the sheets until I fell asleep. One night, someone started knocking on the door really hard and screaming. We got really scared as it was 12:30 a.m. and everyone was asleep by then in our neighborhood. It was extremely rare that someone would be up at that time. My dad took his shotgun and told my mom and me to stay in my room and not move. I was scared for my dad's safety, but I felt relieved when my dad said my neighbor's name. He informed us that a water pipe had broke in our backyard and the water was spraying his house and broke one of his windows. He was nice about the situation and even said he'd help us fix the pipe. My dad got the shovels, as the pipes were underground, and we had to dig to see what was wrong and how we could fix it. As we started digging, they realized that they needed other materials, and they went to get it, leaving me alone in the backyard. There was barely any light back there. The only source of light we had was the moon, and one light post a block away from my house. I was pissed off. I mean, how could they leave an 8-year-old boy there by himself in the dark? But I didn't say anything about it. About 10 minutes had gone by since they left, and I was wondering what was taking them so long. They were only getting some materials after all. But as I was going to go back inside, I saw something moving really fast at the corner of my eye. I froze. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. All I could do was move my eyes. I started to freak out, looking around to see what the hell was running around me. I didn't see anything. It was as if there was nothing there at all. But then I looked to my right, and I saw something that haunts me to this very day. It was a demon, in my opinion. It was so tall, around 7 or 8 feet tall. It had long, skinny legs with a really buff body. It also had very long spiral horns, and his eyes shined in the dark. I still couldn't move. The thing ran by me, looked at me, but it didn't do anything to me. It just looked at me. It could have been a goat or a sheep. I've never seen one so big or one that walks on 2 legs like a human. It ran, and I hid behind a big tree by my neighbor's house. Finally, I could move. I yelled at the top of my lungs while crying hysterically. My dad came running with his shotgun in hand and asked me what was wrong. I explained what I saw to him, but he didn't believe me, nor did my mom. But someone did. My neighbor told me that he thought nothing happened to me because I'm a kid. As time passed, I slowly got over it. I moved from that house and moved to New York. My grandparents sold the house, and I left that experience in the past. However, that's not where this story ends. In my sophomore year in high school, I had a nightmare. The thing that I saw that night was in it this time. I could only see its head as it was hiding behind the big tree. He said 3 words that'll haunt me until my time comes. It said, "You can't hide." I woke up from my nightmare and headed to school. While in school, at around 12:30 p.m., there was an announcement. A classmate of mine had been killed in front of my school by a car without brakes. I turned pale as I thought my nightmare may have something to do with the incident. I was scared and even went home early. I told my parents about it, but this time they took me to a priest and he said he'd give me something in 3 days. Every single day I had the same nightmare until my priest gave me a blessed cross, and I haven't had any nightmares about the thing anymore. However, every night I sleep with the covers over my head. Call me a coward or anything you want, but the thing still hasn't left my mind. Those 3 words haunt me till this day, making me wonder when I will forget or move on from the thing.
My name is Michael, and I'm a prison guard at this penitentiary. As I was doing my rounds today, inmate number 1857, hanging on his cell bars, shouted at me, "Hey, your daughter's 7 years old this year, right? She's the first one I'll visit when I get out." "What?" Enraged, I rushed to the bars and grabbed his collar, and he laughed as if it were amusing. Inmate 1857. His name is Rick, the most notorious criminal in this prison. Rick is a psychopath who killed a woman in her 60s, chopped her up with a knife, and even ate her flesh before claiming insanity. Rick was incredibly lucky. The victim's son actively sought leniency for him. The devout Christian son decided to forgive Rick in the name of God, even after his mother was brutally murdered. It was something I couldn't understand at all. Thanks to this, Rick was acknowledged as mentally impaired and received a 15-year sentence only. After his sentence was confirmed, Rick began to show his true colors. He constantly hurled insults without reason and threatened to kill the families of those who irritated him once he was released. Knowing his madness, people grew anxious as his release date approached. The ironic thing was that this psychopath was a dutiful son. Having lived with a single mother his entire life, he cherished her dearly. His mother began preparing to open a beef jerky store with Rick about a month before his release, and started sending boxes of jerky and letters to the prison. However, bringing in outside food was strictly forbidden in the prison. So we tried to return the parcels she sent, but the warden stopped me and said he would allow the packages to be delivered to Rick. I couldn't understand his actions. The warden must have been bribed by Rick's mother. "Dear son, your mother is preparing a jerky business these days. Please try it and give me your feedback. From your future business partner, Mom." When I opened the box of jerky, I saw a letter written in meticulous handwriting. She seemed quite serious about the business, sending a box of jerky made with various recipes to the prison every week. Smoked, chili, teriyaki flavors, and more. Thanks to this, Rick spent his days chewing on jerky. He even began using the jerky like currency, ordering his cellmates around. The prisoners, who relied solely on the prison-provided rations, cleaned for Rick, acted violently on his behalf, or dug up information on people Rick didn't like in exchange for jerky. Rick also collected feedback from the inmates about which jerky recipe tasted the best, and sent letters to his mother. He was already fulfilling his role as a business partner before his release. He showed no remorse for the deceased victim and focused solely on making the business prosper. I was angry at the victim's son. If my mother had been so brutally murdered, I would have never forgiven the perpetrator. Due to his excessive tolerance, the evil demon would soon be released into the world, and more victims would follow, which could include my own family. Rick's release date approached, now just a week away, and his mother had already opened the store and was waiting for him. The store was named Mom's Beef Jerky, as a tribute to her love for her son. As the release date neared and my anxiety peaked, I took a secret day off, which I didn't tell my wife and daughter about. I had to visit Rick's store, track his movements, and carefully devise ways to protect my family from him. When I went to the address written on the letter, Mom's Beef Jerky, I noticed a sign with a familiar phrase. It was a store opened by Rick's mother. At that time, I saw the warden coming out of the store. It was clear that he was involved in some sort of backroom dealing with Rick's mother. I hid in my car until the warden disappeared, then entered the store. Now that I had witnessed it with my own eyes, I had to expose their inappropriate dealings. As I opened the store door, there stood a man there with fair skin and a gentle demeanor. "Welcome." "Huh? Isn't this Rick's mother's store?" "Oh, yes, it is. Who are you?" "You should be the employee. I'm a prison guard at the prison where your son is incarcerated. I saw the warden leaving just now. What's the relationship between him and Rick's mother?" "Oh, Rick's mother is inside. Would you like to meet her and hear it directly from her? Follow me." I followed the man to a storeroom deep inside the kitchen, and he pointed to the ceiling, saying, "She's here." There, a middle-aged woman's head was hanging from the ceiling, shriveled and twisted after being soaked in sauce. "Ah! What is this?" I was so shocked that I screamed and collapsed on the spot. Then the man smiled brightly and said, "I'm the son of the woman who was killed by Rick. I've been waiting for Rick to be released and come to this store as soon as possible. Whew! I've sent the rest of the body, and now only the head remains. I'll prepare the head according to the final recipe Rick advised, and plan to send it to the prison tomorrow." I ran out of there in utter disbelief, and didn't tell anyone about what happened that day. A week later, I saw the corner of the prison warden's mouth go up strangely as he stared at Rick, who was happily tasting the last delivered jerky. And not long after his release, Rick went missing.
I was at home for 3 days for a mini stay-at-home vacation from work. I live in a very rural area, about an hour from the city. Honestly, I hadn't really taken these days off for any particular reason. I guess I was just feeling like I needed a break. It was on my first day off as I stayed at home and watched TV, among doing some other small things around the house. Around dinner time, though, a knock came from the front door. I sat up from the couch and looked at the clock, seeing it was 7 p.m. It was strange for anyone to be at my house in general, but given the time as well, it was even more so. I walked up to the door and cracked it open. A man was on the doorstep, smiling at me. He looked like any other guy, no special features or anything. "What do you need?" I asked, looking around behind him and noticing no car or truck in my driveway. The man maintained his smile as he went through a whole scenario he was in just a few minutes ago. He said he was on the road that connected to my driveway when someone slammed into his car and drove off, leaving him stranded and having to come to me for help. The way he described it, and just from looking at him, things didn't seem to add up. My driveway was far from the road, and the chances he got into an accident right by the entrance was almost zero on such an empty road. I told him I'd call the police for him if he'd like, but the man declined. He said he wanted to borrow my phone to call his wife. It took me a few seconds to respond, because being unsure about the situation made me nervous to say no to him. I said I would call the police, and that was it. but the man's smile went away as he said don't worry about it and walked away from the porch. I closed the door, then looked out the window as the man walked down the driveway and disappeared in the dark. After a moment, I called the police just to be safe. About 20 minutes later though, I got a call back from them saying there were no signs of any crashes on the road. I stayed up late that night, looking out the windows and just being overall a little bit uneasy. But once it got to around 12, I was too tired to stay up. I went upstairs to my bedroom and got ready, then got in bed and fell fast asleep. I remember waking up frantically, but not understanding why. Like maybe I'd heard something in my sleep, but didn't wake up fast enough to comprehend it. Looking over, it was about 3 a.m. I got up from my bed and walked over to the door so I could listen for any sounds in the rest of the house. It was mostly quiet, but I could hear a slight rustling sound from somewhere outside. I carefully walked down the stairs to check on it, thinking it was probably just a bush brushing against the house. But as I got to the downstairs hallway, I realized the sound was moving. It was going along the edge of the house and toward the front. I felt my heart start racing as I tried to reassure myself everything was okay, but then the rustling stopped, and only a moment later, there was a knock at the door. I stood still at the end of the hallway and stared at the front door, terrified of whoever was out there. After a few seconds, I moved away and up to a small window on the side of the house that had a view of the porch. Through the blinds, I could see two men, both in dark clothing, and both holding something in their hands. It looked like tools or weapons of some kind. My eyes widened in fear as I backed away and quietly walked back up to my room. More knocking echoed through the house as I called the police and locked myself in. As I stayed on the phone, the knocks turned into banging thuds, and I immediately knew it was what I feared. They were trying to break the door down. Hit after hit, non-stop for over 5 minutes, they banged on the door, shaking the whole house. Then the operator on the phone finally said an officer was pulling up to my house, and at that same time, all the banging stopped. When the cop pulled up though, he said he didn't see any men at my door. They must have run off just before he could see them. The door, however, was barely hanging on. The wood was bent and splintered, with only the bolt lock still in place. I was lucky that the police were able to show up quick enough, but I guess I was also smart to have not helped that one man. I'm assuming if I had, I would have only accelerated their plans to do whatever it was they were trying to do. Even today though, I still worry about them coming back.
I angrily approached the door and looked through the peephole, only to see a group of people wearing purge masks while holding machetes. At first glance, I thought it was the guests from the party, but then I heard one of the guys say, "Maybe we can go through the backyard and take him out there." My heart began to submerge into my stomach. The day was October 21st, just several days shy before Halloween. My anticipation grew higher and higher as I planned to host a Halloween party at my place. I remember setting up a Facebook event and inviting my close friends and coworkers to join the party. My friend Dave would usually be the one to host these kind of events, but unfortunately he couldn't do it this year as his parents were having renovations done at their house. While setting up the event, I didn't take into consideration that my parents were extremely against Halloween festivities. They would always lecture me on why Halloween was a holiday only made for kids who wanted to go to hell and worship the devil. What made things more frustrating was how they kept the same beliefs until now despite me being in my late teens. One night, I noticed my mom sitting in the living room watching TV. I began to approach her direction while trying to muster up any plausible excuse that would persuade her in the favor of my party idea. I casually hovered over her saying, "Hey, Mom, just in case Dad didn't tell you today, I just wanted to say that you look very beautiful."
What the hell do you want, George?
What?
You're not usually this nice, so spit it out, whatever you have to say.
Can I invite my friends over for Halloween this year?
Get the hell out of my face!
I remember heading to my bedroom while pouting under my breath on how I was living such an unfair life. I sat in front of my computer and began sulking for the remainder of the night as I messaged the bad news to my friend Dave. As I embarrassingly addressed the issue, Dave responded back by suggesting that we purchase an Airbnb instead of hosting the party at someone's house. I thought it was a pretty smart idea, so we mutually agreed to get an Airbnb that was located somewhere more secluded and away from the suburban part of town. Feelings of excitement began exuberating throughout my body, as I couldn't help but feel exhilarated at the notion that I didn't have to deal with my parents' incompetence. Fast forward to October 31st and it was officially Halloween. I began driving towards the Airbnb destination about an hour or two after check-in, just so I could prep before the guests arrived. As I got closer to the destination, I remember seeing a decent-sized house that looked a tad run down. It didn't look like there were any other houses around, just a lot of tall trees and a scent of pine cones in the air. I figured it would add to the spooky ambiance considering this was Halloween. As I got inside, I immediately started setting up for the party while having a few glasses of alcohol on the side. A couple hours later, the sun was finally beginning to set, which meant that the guests were on their way to the party. I figured I'd dress as Georgie from the movie It, as my name was George, so pun intended. I texted and called my friend Dave, but unfortunately didn't get a response. I speculated that everyone was either unable to find the correct address or was just going to show up to this party fashionably late. That's when the living room TV begins to abruptly turn on. I then saw a bizarre message playing on the TV, as if it came straight out of the movie The Purge saying,
"This is not a test. This is your emergency broadcast system announcing the commencement of the annual purge sanctioned by the US government. Weapons of Class 4 and lower have been authorized for use during the purge. All other weapons are restricted. Government officials..."
What the hell is going on? I turn the TV off and immediately hear a knock coming from the front door. I opened the door and saw some kids shout, "Trick or treat!" Sorry guys, no candy here today. You suck, and wearing a raincoat isn't a costume, cheapskate. I'm dressed as Georgie, you idiot! I slammed the door shut and began to hammer down another drink. That's when I heard another knock at the door. Go away. Go away. Go away. Go away! I'm not handing out any candy, you stupid kids! I angrily approached the door and looked through the peephole, only to see a group of people wearing purge masks while holding machetes. At first glance, I thought it was the guests from the party. But then I heard one of the guys say, "Maybe we can go through the backyard and take him out there." My heart began to submerge into my stomach. I turned off all the house lights and simultaneously darted across the living room to make sure that the backyard sliding door was locked. As I secured the lock handle, one of the purgers slammed his hand on the glass door while yelling, "Open the door, Georgie! Leave me alone or I'm calling the cops!" That's when I grabbed a large blade from the knife set on the kitchen counter and ran towards the bedrooms. I then saw a red balloon hovering above the ground. I couldn't tell if I was hallucinating or not from the belligerent state that I was in. Nonetheless, I plowed through the hallway and locked myself in one of the bedrooms. As I glanced through the blinds of the bedroom window, I saw someone dressed as Pennywise dancing psychotically while staring in my direction. I heard nothing but the sound of my heart throbbing vigorously through my chest cavity. That's when I hear the closet door open behind me. I couldn't move a single muscle as I was honestly petrified to turn around. I then felt a soft tap on my shoulder with someone saying, "Hi, Georgie." Ah! How the hell did you get in here? You want a balloon, Georgie? What? Here, take it. Take it. Get away from me, clown! You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too! That's when the clown's mouth abnormally opens wide and begins to swallow my entire head. I felt like my life was slowly diminishing. Through my drunken haze, I dug the kitchen blade into the stomach of the clown despite not being able to see a thing. I could feel the hand that was digging at the clown's stomach become wet from the blood being shed everywhere. I then opened my eyes and realized that the mouth that was supposedly swallowing my head was none other than a brown paper bag being held by my friend Dave. Happy Halloween! Ah!